Welcome to Strip Cover Look, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for the second in a six-part series as we float along with The Wild Duck. This as it was penned by Henrik Ibsen, and it is only by the second act that we are already starting to really see the genius going on here. I think we have read Peer Gynt, we read Doll's House, we read An Enemy of the People, and we read Ghosts. That's four. I think by this point in time, we have come to expect pure brilliance out of Henrik Ibsen, and it's happening again. So what are we doing here? We're going to start with a summary of what happened here, and then get into the stuffs at hand. So we begin Act 2 in Hjalmar's studio. In Hjalmar's studio with Gina and Gina's daughter. Why do I say Gina's daughter? Why do I say Gina's daughter? Flip to the front and look at Hedvig's age in the list of players, and you tell me why I say Gina's daughter. That daughter, Hedvig, is pretty bright. Old Ekdahl comes home and helps himself to some hot water and retreats to his office to do work, and there should be no interruptions, mind you. Then Hjalmar comes home and old Ekdahl reemerges at the sound of his son's voice. And Hjalmar lies and says that he did not see old Ekdahl, as old Ekdahl had left through the party. Lies? Hjalmar lies? That might be something to which we will return. Says he doesn't see him at the party, and they share some family chatter, and then we get this exchange on page 23. Hedvig, Gina's daughter, says to Hjalmar, "Oh, what nonsense. Come, where are they, father? All of the good things you promised me, you know." And Hjalmar says, "Oh, if I haven't forgotten all about them." And Hedvig says, "Now you're only teasing me, father. Oh, it's too bad of you. Where have you put them?" Hjalmar says, "No, I positively forgot to get anything. But wait a little, I have something else for you, Hedvig." He goes and searches the pockets of his coat. Hedvig skipping and clapping her hands. "Oh, mother, mother." Gina says, "There, you see, if you only give him a little time." Hjalmar says, with a paper, look, here it is." Hedvig says, "That? Why, that's only a paper." And Hjalmar says, "That is the bill of fare, my dear. The whole bill of fare. Here, you see, menu. That means bill of fare." Hedvig says, "Haven't you got anything else?" To which Hjalmar replies, "I forgot the other things I tell you, but you may take my word for it. These dainties are very satisfying. Sit down at the table and read the bill of fare, and I'll describe to you how the dishes taste. Here you are, Hedvig." Hedvig, gulping down tears, "Thank you." Seats herself, but does not read. Gina makes signs to her. Hjalmar notices it. That maybe a little bit of tension between those two. It's hard to tell at this point. What follows is a bit of the Moreaus and a man swearing off both music and booze right before he accepts a beer and starts playing music. This seems to be the way the melancholy works for Hjalmar. In the middle of that melody, Gregor shows up, revealing that he's left his father's house to stay in a hotel. We learn during Gregor's visit that he fancies himself a bit of a woodsman. Quite a woodsman, in fact, and he thinks old Ekdahl should return to the woods with him, to the place old Ekdahl himself used to haunt when old Ekdahl was a lieutenant. Old Ekdahl becomes a touch incensed after all. Why would he want to leave? Why would he not want to leave what? Well, there's his poultry, and his pigeons, and his rabbits, and his duck, a wild duck, oh yes, a wild duck indeed, that stays in the middle of old Ekdahl's little touch of the wild. And that wild duck, well, it belongs to Hedvig. Shortly hereafter, old Ekdahl apparently falls asleep, and Gregors says that he would like to rent one of the spare rooms that I'm blanking on their last name. The Ekdahl, that the Ekdahl clan has. He says he intends on making some type of stay in general, which is a weird thing to say, especially considering that you retreated to the Ekdahl's estate in order to recruit old Ekdahl to come and stay with you. We're getting a little bit of character out of Gregors at this point, who seems to have a touch of Superman syndrome, where he thinks he can save the day and save the day at any point. He came to recruit old Ekdahl to a place he thinks old Ekdahl might like better, while also knowing he would be removing old Ekdahl from the house of Hjalmar. Hjalmar seemed to be assuming his father as a dead weight. And then we get a little bit of touch from a little touch of dialogue from Gregors later in the chapter that I think we're going to get back to. But the first thing that I want to sort of talk about here, one small note on the writing involved here. It is difficult to tell, being this far removed from the society in which Ibsen was writing this, if the and by the by were basically like people use LOL today, or if it's something that just got past him in the revision process to where he didn't revise it out, even though we've seen the phrase by the by at least 5 times, which means it's happening about every 4 or 5 pages. Actually, that's not true, 6 or 7 pages. But we've seen the small tick pop up many more times than that even, which is a little bit weird from a reading perspective. But I want to get to page 22, and we'll go over this. Hjalmar says, so they're having a little bit of conversation with the family, and the topic of Tokay, I think, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, comes up, which is a wine, and old Ekdahl says, Tokay, there's a fine wine for you. To which Hjalmar replies, it may be a fine wine, but of course, the vintages differ. It all depends on how much sunshine the grapes have had. And Gina says, why, you know everything, Ekdahl. And he replies, and old Ekdahl replies, and did they dispute that? To which Hjalmar says, they tried, but they were requested to observe that it was just the same with the chamberlains, that with them, too, different batches were of different qualities. And Gina says, what did they think? What things you think of? And old Ekdahl says, hee. So they got that in their pipes too. And Hjalmar replies, right in their teeth. And Ekdahl says, did you hear that, Gina? He said, right in the very teeth of all the chamberlains. And Gina says, fancy, right in their teeth. And Hjalmar replies, yes, but I don't want it talked about. One doesn't speak of such things. The whole affair passed off quite amicably, of course. They were nice, genial fellows. I didn't want to wound them. Not I. That's an interesting little exchange. And it tells us a few things about Hjalmar, doesn't it? First, let's flash back to page 8, when that conversation did actually happen. But not quite as it was presented to the Ekdahl family. The flabby gentleman says, do you think, Mr. Verley, that Tokay may be considered one of the most wholesome sorts of wines? And Verley says, I can answer for the Tokay you had today, at any rate. It's one of the very finest seasons. Of course, you would notice that. And the flabby gentleman says, yes, it had a remarkably delicate flavor. Hjalmar shyly asks, is there any difference between the seasons? And the flabby gentleman laughs. The flabby gentleman being one of the chamberlains. laughs and says, "Come, that's good." Verley smiles. "It really doesn't pay to set fine wine before you." The thin-haired gentleman replies, "Tokay is like photographs, Mr. Ekdahl. They both need sunshine, am I not right?" And Hjalmar says, "Yes, light is important, no doubt." So that exchange did happen, but in quite the opposite fashion, as it was pronounced by young Ekdahl to his family. It was the Chamberlains and Verley who taught Hjalmar and put him down, not the other way around. So this tells us a few things. One, Ekdahl truly is the man of the house. He's the hero being set forth by the household. In this, so we get that Hjalmar is called Ekdahl, even in front of his father. Now, there's an old saying that a boy becomes a man the first time someone called, like for me, the first time someone called me Mr. Fort and I didn't say, "Hey, that's my dad." You know, one of those little things. So when you're being called Mr. Fort in front of your father, that means you're the man of the household. But what else is going on here is that we're learning, well, Ekdahl's a liar. So we have to, from this point, understand anything that does or has come out of his mouth may be on the topsy-turvy. We don't know where on the spectrum it is, but it probably isn't straightforward. But another thing that's going on there is that we're understanding that the Ekdahl clan is maybe working or lower class, right? And what they're doing here is, so trying to think of another way to illustrate this. When there is a disparity between family members in their status, social status, oftentimes the other family members see it as the preeminent family member's job, essentially, when representing the family in that higher status, in that higher class, to represent the family well and to stick it to the man, right? We see Ekdahl and Gina applauding Hjalmar as he sticks it to the man, and he teaches those Chamberlains a thing or two, right? This is really not just with families, it's with clans in general. It is with any type of affiliation someone sees themselves representing. If you are a member of, we will use Republican and Democrat, right? If you are a Democrat and you watch another Democrat on a Fox News show, Fox News being predominantly Republican, you want that Democrat to really stick it to them. You know, if you are a Republican and you watch Tucker Carlson appear on CNN, you want Tucker Carlson to really stick it to him. And we have that going on here. And because of that, because of how blatant that illustration is, we really get to understand the disparity between what we're seeing is that Verley or Hjalmar, they're not poor. They're not destitute. They might be poor because he's assuming to describe tastes to his daughter because he cannot afford to buy her fancy foods. So they're not destitute. They have food, not nice food. Everyone wants nice things once in a while. So what we're looking at here is how great off the Verley clan must be. That someone who is a business owner is really trying to stick it to the man. Another thing that's going on there, all this stuff, what we have to do is we have to understand that anything which comes out of Hjalmar's mouth not only might be a lie, but may have been a lie. So all of the things in Act 1 that Hjalmar was confessing, in essence, to Gregor's. What truth was there to that? I think we were led to believe in the act of the act that it was Mr. Verley who was the low-down scoundrel. And he may still be. He may still be every bit the scoundrel that he's sort of painted to be in that first act. Especially as we come to understand some of the things that we're understanding about the characters involved in Act 2. So how much of the story which came out of, which was spewed out of Hjalmar's mouth, was true? So there's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? Presumably it was true because Verley essentially admitted to as much. But was it the whole truth? Because Verley did take exception to the way some things were transcribed from the way that he assumed that they had happened to the way that they were coming out of Gregor's mouth. Now, with those questions in mind, we're going to move forward to page 26. Gregor has arrived, and he says, meeting Hedvig, "So, is that your daughter?" "Yes," says Hedvig. "And she is your only child?" "Yes, the only one. She is the joy of our lives and," lowering his voice, "at the same time, our deepest sorrow, Gregor's. Our deepest sorrows." To which Gregor responds, "What do you mean?" And Hjalmar tells him she is in serious danger of losing her eyesight. She is in serious danger of losing her eyesight. There's another character we've already met whose eyes were giving him trouble. Which character was that? I don't quite remember. On the kissing page to this, page 27, we get this little exchange. Gregor says, "It makes one realize one's own age to see young people growing up. How long is it since you were married?" Gina says, "We've been married, let me see, just on 15 years. And Gregor replies, "Is it so long as that?" Gina becomes attentive and looks at him. "Yes, it is indeed." Then Hjalmar says, "Yes, so it is. 15 years, but all but a few months," changing his tone. "They must have been long years for you up at the works, Gregors." And then later on in that page 27 and into 28, old Ekdahl comes from his room without his pipe, but with his old-fashioned uniform cap on his head, his gait somewhat unsteady. Ekdahl says, "Come now, Hjalmar, let's sit down and have a good talk about this." "What is it again?" Hjalmar says, going towards him. "Father, we have a visitor here, Gregor's Verley. I don't know if you remember him." And Ekdahl says, looking at Gregor's, who has risen, "Verley, is that the son? What does he want with me?" And Hjalmar says, "Nothing. It's me he's come to see." And old Ekdahl says, "Oh, then there's nothing wrong?" And Hjalmar says, No, of course not. Not that I'm old Ekdahl says, "Not that I'm afraid, but press X for doubt, will you?" What we've got going on here is we have Gina, for sure, who is hiding something. We have Ekdahl. We have Hjalmar. It's so hard with the Ekdahls. They're all Ekdahls. I shouldn't be saying it that way, but one is credited as Ekdahl. We have Hjalmar, who, Hjalmar is a liar. We know this by now. Gina seems to have her panties in a twist on something. And old Ekdahl, who is acting awfully suspiciously. "One of the Whirlies is here? What does he want?" "Oh, just to visit." Oh, yeah, no, that's cool. Whatever. But he wasn't here to get me, was he? "Get you for what?" "Oh, nothing. And what we've got here, what we've got to take the time to step back and look at, is that we have Hjalmar's guilt backed up to Gina's guilt, backed up to old Ekdahl's guilt. Ibsen is giving us these things in waves. Here's the wave of guilt. Here's the wave of suspicion. Here's the wave of lies. It is absolutely masterful the way in which he is able to sort of sew all these things together in such quick succession. So we've got old Ekdahl and his animals, and this is where the true literary sense of the genius, I think, is going to start coming from here. We have old Ekdahl, who owns wild animals, basically caged birds. He is a wild man living in the confines of civil society. So there's some parallel there, right? Why does he want to have these birds and have them in cages? Because they're kind of like him. He feels that they are like him. This is the sense of camaraderie he gets from having those wild birds. His prized possession? Well, it's a wild duck that actually belongs to his granddaughter. One small thing on page 30. Let's go ahead and, I don't know if I didn't mark it. Oh yeah, I did. Old Ekdahl said, Gregor says yes when he's being shown these animals. Yes, and I can see a fowl laying in the blanket. Replies old Ekdahl, a fowl. And Gregor says, isn't it a duck? And Ekdahl says, why, of course it's a duck. I don't know how the words translate, but F-O-W-L and F-O-U-L mean very different things, but they sound the same. So that when Gregor says that's foul, and old Ekdahl says foul, Gregor replies, isn't it a duck? Oh, right. No, a duck. Yeah. Hey, that's a duck. I don't know how the translations work. I don't know how the translations pass over. But what a wonderful little Derrida would be proud of that twist. I'll just say it that way. Now, when we look at it, old Ekdahl absolutely wants to show these birds off when Gregor comes over. He absolutely, hey, let me show him. And he's got to argue Gina and Hjalmar into letting him show Gregor these birds. Why? Gina and Hjalmar are ashamed of this wild side. They're ashamed of this little secret. They're ashamed of this bastardization that has taken root in their household. And on 31, Gregor says, how did you manage to catch it? Speaking of the duck. How did you manage to catch it, Lieutenant Ekdahl? Ekdahl says, I didn't catch it. There's a certain man in this town who I have to thank for it. And Gregor says, that man was not my father, was he? And Ekdahl says, you've hit it. Your father and no one else. And Hjalmar replies, strange that you should guess that, Gregor. And Gregor says, you were telling me that you owed so many things to my father, so I thought perhaps. And Gina says, but we didn't get the duck from Mr. Verley himself. And Ekdahl replies, it's Hakon. It's Hakon Verley we have to thank for her. All the same, Gina, to Gregor's. He was shooting from a boat, you see, and he brought her down. Your father's sight is not very good now. She was only wounded. Gregor says, she's got a couple slugs in her body, I suppose. Hjalmar says, yes, 2 or 3. And Hedvig replies, she was hit under the wing so that she couldn't fly. Jesus Christ, Ibsen. What are you doing here? You're telling us point blank, yeah, no, Hedvig, that girl's not Hjalmar's. We have Mr. Verley to thank for that. To which the young girl says, she's got a couple slugs in her body, she does, she just can't fly. Why might not she be able to fly? Those things which are wrong with her, those things which are wrong for her that she inherited from a man with poor eyesight and thus a poor shot, those same things which are inheritable and seem to be holding Hedvig back. They haven't the heart to tell her she can't fly. And later on 31, Hjalmar says, she has got fat, you see. She has lived in there so long now that she has forgotten her natural wild life, and it all depends on that. Haven't we all, Hjalmar? Haven't we all got fat and forgot our wild side? But just sort of blatantly striking us in the face with what we're assuming is a child conceived out of wedlock but born in wedlock. And golly, Verley has sown the seeds, if you will, around town. And what a ravenous crown of thorns is going on here. But that is all I have for episode 2 in the series. I hope to see you back here next week for Act 3 of the play. This is shaping up to be pretty good, and I can't wait to see what Ibsen has in store for next week. Maybe.